is a pleasure. I hope you're well, and well, I hope you are. Let's enjoy our coffee. This is one of those moments where I have so many thoughts in my head that to get them all out at once will come out as blah, 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 blah. So I just drink and say good day. Remember, again, ah, I love, when you come back to uni, it's a very good example of seeing patterns repeat over and over and over and over again. And as they repeat, you can then anticipate, and then it frees up space in your brain to think more deeply about the same situation. It's very similar to watching a movie multiple times, and you start to see things you didn't see previously, but you don't just see new things. You also start to realize that there could always be new things each time you view it. So it makes you realize that even though you know something new, there's now something else you don't yet know. It simultaneously makes you more proficient, I guess, in certain respects, but it also makes you less, I wouldn't say ambitious, but much more controlled and not needing to infuse your achievement with your own self-worth. The achievement is more a consequence of development you've already made within yourself. That is almost impossible when you first, I find anyway, at least I can't talk about the world, I can talk about here in Sydney. I think when one first begins to become an adult, lots of things are surprising that may not be as surprising to someone who has unfortunately had more time just to go through it, observe it, think about it. I think that's where the advantage can compound. But we're also lucky that, we live in 2026 in the sense that now we can be 45, and thanks to medical technology and health and food intake and environment and learning to avoid things like UV radiation and whatever else and having more sleep, etc., one can stretch out their health span, not their lifespan, to the point where they are able to start a separate career again, like I'm doing. And whereas if you look at people who were aged 45, say 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, they might not have had the same opportunity. But of course, this might be compounding down the track. It might be that people at 95 look like people at 35 in 100 years from now or less. And then they'll be able to say the same thing at an even higher level, because they might look at us now, or me at 45, who's talking about people who are 25, and they'll look at me and go, you don't know what you're talking about. I've done 15 degrees and over the last 100 years, and But what does that give you as a conclusion? Well, one of the conclusions I see is that we are interacting with the environment to create our own reality in our own minds to a large degree. And one of the things that you can see is, for example, when I'm teaching and I'm at uni, you see multiple people, hundreds and hundreds of people, all starting out roughly in their early 20s or late teens. And you start to see patterns, not about them as human beings, but patterns in their behaviour, which are common. G'day, anime love, nice to see you. And those patterns you can then put into classes, because the patterns themselves are a very small number in comparison to the amount of people you meet. So you'll notice certain trends. Now you can't say all people are like this. That's not the correct way of saying it. What you can say is that it is unsurprising to find a certain trait in a group with which you're interacting when the group has some common characteristics. And that group can be anything. Like, let's say the group has an average height of 7 feet. It doesn't mean everyone's going to be 7 feet. So you can't say, oh, the group is going to behave this way. No, you can never do that. That's the top-down trying to look at the quantum via the emergent, which is the wrong way to look at it. What you can say is that from the quantum, something emergent actually, or from the individual, something emergent actually pops through. So one of those things is that you'll see a certain group of people who are wanting to, what some people would call peacocking, sort of to try and show off. And it is a certain type, and you realize as you get older that it's not personal. Like when you first, say, go through school or turn 19, 20, and you see someone act in a certain way, you go, oh, look at that person, that's an arrogant prick, whatever. And now I don't describe it that way at all. What I see is a young person who feels intimidated and is trying to not show in their mind weakness, because they need to feel that in order to survive, they have to put on a certain bravado. And it's a very different way of looking at it. So you don't take it personally when they try to not say hello to the teacher because they want to be tough or whatever. And you realize that they're just playing a game that you've seen hundreds and hundreds of times. G'day, Max Harwood, sorry. And it doesn't take away from the person, because the person has their own deep inner world. They have their own likes, dislikes, loves, hates, etc. And you can't minimize the person over that. What you can do is not let that trait in them force you to reduce them to that trait. That's what I'm saying. So, for example, if you see that, young males in their 20s of a certain group or certain this tend to have a certain behavior, for example, someone might say that. You can't say, therefore, number one, you can't say the obvious fallacy, which is that therefore all males are this. You can't say that, of course. And you can't say there will be some males who will act like this either, because that reduces those some males to some sort of one dimension. But what you can say is that that particular dimension exhibited by the subset of that group can be understood in a way that's not personal. And then it allows for a little bit more compassion, I find, from my side. Only a little bit, because sometimes they can be very hurtful, not men or males or groups. In any particular group, any trait that may be hurtful can still be hurtful. Ego is strong, we can look past that valuable info. Hey, Alfpog, one of the original from Periscope 10 years ago. Pleasure, mate. That's a coffee for you. So I say that because, hey, I'm about to teach a class. And in that class, you will get some people who behave a certain way, some people behave another way. Now, each person has their own narrative. They're not seeing you. Like, for example, they're looking at me as the teacher. They're not seeing me as who I see myself. They're just seeing some person who's teaching them maths. And so whatever they are thinking, it is on a one-dimensional version of yourself. And so there's no need to have them offend you, or even the other way. Even if they're nice to you, it doesn't mean that therefore you're a good person or a bad person or anything else. It is them operating through a world in the way as best as they can, and through the understanding that they have at that time and that age to survive. And you can extend that even further to anyone who's 50, 60, who's grown up in one culture, in a subculture. I've got to go teach. So it was nice to see you guys, and a pleasure. And until next time, always take life one smack at a time, eh?